Dance of Rebellion. Paris, 1919. Amélie Rousseau found a crumpled note tucked behind an old painting in a deserted gallery, its faded ink declaring "I await you beyond the veil," signed by Lieutenant Pierre Martin. Chapter 1. The Whispered Note and the Ghost of a Promise. The dust motes danced in the weak Parisian sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows of the Galerie Moreau. Amélie Rousseau traced the outline of a chipped gilded frame, her fingers lingering on the faded canvas. It was a landscape, unremarkable in its execution, depicting a pastoral scene that seemed a lifetime away from the ravaged city outside. The gallery, once a haven for art lovers, now stood silent, a mausoleum of forgotten beauty, much like Paris itself in the spring of 1919. The Great War had ended, but its scars lingered, etched onto every building, every face, every heart. Amélie, at 58, carried her own scars, invisible but no less profound. The war had claimed her husband, Jean-Luc, a cartographer who had volunteered to map the shifting front lines, leaving her with a hollow ache that echoed through the empty rooms of their Montmartre apartment. She had volunteered as a nurse, tending to the broken bodies and shattered minds that poured back from the trenches. The horror she had witnessed had aged her prematurely, stealing the vibrancy from her once bright eyes, leaving behind a weary resignation. Yet, a flicker of something akin to curiosity, a long-dormant ember, stirred within her as she examined the painting. It was tucked away in a back room, amongst canvases deemed too damaged or insignificant to display. The owner, Monsieur Dubois, an old friend of Jean-Luc's, had given her free rein to explore the gallery, a bittersweet distraction from the gnawing loneliness. "Take what you like, Amélie," he'd said, his voice raspy with grief and the dust of neglect. "It's all going to be auctioned off, or worse, left to rot." As she reached behind the landscape, her fingers brushed against something unexpected, a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was wedged between the canvas and the wooden stretcher, hidden from casual view. Curiosity overriding her usual caution, she carefully extracted it. The paper was thin, almost translucent with age, and folded many times. Unfolding it with trembling hands, she revealed a hastily scrawled message, written in faded ink. The words, though simple, sent a shiver down her spine. "I await you beyond the veil." It was signed, with a flourish that hinted at a younger, more hopeful hand, Lieutenant Pierre Martin. Amélie stared at the note, her heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against her ribs. The words were cryptic, unsettling, yet strangely compelling. Beyond the veil, what did it mean? Was it a lover's plea? A soldier's final message? A coded message? The name, Pierre Martin, stirred a faint, almost forgotten memory, a name whispered in hushed tones during her nursing days, a name associated with what? She couldn't quite grasp it. The gallery was silent save for the distant rumble of a passing motor car and the faint creak of the old buildings settling around her. The air was thick with the scent of dust, oil paint, and the ghosts of the past. Amélie felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to know more, to unravel the mystery behind the note. It was as if the silent plea had reached across the years, across the chasm of war and loss, and touched something deep within her. She carefully folded the note and tucked it into the pocket of her worn wool coat. The landscape painting, once insignificant, now held a strange allure. She examined it more closely, searching for any clue, any connection to the mysterious Lieutenant Martin. The scene depicted a rolling field, a small copse of trees, and a distant church steeple. It was unremarkable, yet there was something about the way the light fell on the trees, a certain melancholy in the brushstrokes, that resonated with the tone of the note. Amélie decided then, and there. She would find out who Lieutenant Pierre Martin was and what his message meant. It was a foolish whim, perhaps a distraction from her own grief, but it was a distraction she desperately needed. She felt a spark of purpose, a flicker of the woman she had been before the war had stolen her joy. It felt almost like a betrayal for Jean-Luc. But the letter felt different, separate. Leaving the gallery, she stepped out into the bustling Parisian street. The city was slowly coming back to life, rebuilding itself, but the wounds were still raw. Soldiers with missing limbs and haunted eyes mingled with the crowds, a constant reminder of the cost of war. Amelie walked with a newfound determination, the crumpled note a tangible link to a past she was determined to explore. She started her search at the military archives, a vast, imposing building filled with endless rows of files and records. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and disinfectant, a sterile, impersonal atmosphere that mirrored the bureaucratic nature of war. She spent hours poring over records, her eyes straining under the dim light, searching for any mention of Lieutenant Pierre Martin. The archivist, a thin, bespectacled man with a perpetually weary expression, was initially unhelpful. "Madam," he sighed, "we have thousands of records. Finding one specific soldier is like searching for a needle in a haystack." But Amelie persisted, her quiet determination wearing down his resistance. She explained about the note, the painting, the mysterious message. She didn't mention her own loss, her own yearning for connection, but it was there unspoken, in the lines etched around her eyes, in the tremor in her voice. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the archivist located a file. It was thin, disappointingly so, containing only a few basic details. Lieutenant Pierre Martin, 2nd Battalion, Infantry. Born in Lyon. Served on the Western Front. Missing in action, presumed dead, near Verdun, 1916. Amelie felt a pang of disappointment, a familiar ache of loss. Another life cut short by the war. But there was something else in the file, a small, folded piece of paper tucked into the back. It was a photograph, faded and creased, of a young man in uniform. He was smiling, his eyes bright with youthful optimism, a stark contrast to the grim reality of the trenches. He had a kind face, a gentle smile that hinted at a sensitive soul. He looked so familiar. And there, scribbled on the back of the photo in a neat hand, she finds a small, It was the exact way she wrote her initial. But how? Chapter 2. Echoes of War in a Silent Gallery. On the back of the photograph was a punch to Amelie's gut, a sudden, sharp intake of breath that left her momentarily lightheaded. It was her, undeniably. The looped curve, the slight slant, the way the tail curled back on itself, it was a mirror image of her own handwriting, a signature she had used countless times on letters, documents, even nursing charts. But how could it be here, on the back of a photograph of a soldier she was almost certain she had never met? She stared at the photograph, turning it over and over in her hands, as if the sheer act of physical examination could somehow unlock its secrets.
Lieutenant Pierre Martin.
Missing in action.
Presumed dead.
And yet, he had written her initial on his photograph. The archivist, sensing her distress, hovered nearby, his expression a mixture of curiosity and professional detachment. "Madame Rousseau? Is something wrong?" Amelie shook her head, unable to speak. She felt a strange mix of confusion, disbelief, and a nascent, flickering hope. Could it be possible? Could she have known him, somehow, in the chaos of the war? Had their paths crossed, briefly, unknowingly, leaving behind this single, cryptic clue? She forced herself to focus, to push aside the swirling emotions and concentrate on the facts. The file indicated he had gone missing near Verdun in 1916. That was the year she had been stationed at a field hospital just outside the city, a makeshift facility overwhelmed with the constant influx of wounded and dying. She had worked tirelessly, day and night, tending to horrific injuries, witnessing unimaginable suffering. The faces of the soldiers had blurred together, a continuous stream of pain and despair. Could he have been one of them? Could she have treated him, spoken to him, perhaps even connected with him? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a dangerous path to tread, this delving into the past, this resurrecting of ghosts. But she couldn't stop now. The whispered note, the familiar, had ignited a fire within her, a desperate need to know the truth. She thanked the archivist, her voice trembling slightly, and left the archives, clutching the photograph and the crumpled note like precious talismans. The Parisian streets seemed different now, the bustling crowds, the noise and activity, fading into the background. Her mind was consumed by the image of the young lieutenant, his smiling face a stark contrast to the grim reality of his fate. Back at the Gallery Moreau, Amélie spread the photograph and the note on a dusty table, bathed in the soft, melancholic light filtering through the grimy windows. She examined the painting again, the pastoral scene, the distant church steeple. The landscape, she realized with a jolt, was strikingly similar to the area around Verdun. The rolling hills, the small villages, the ubiquitous church steeples, it was a landscape she knew intimately, a landscape forever etched in her memory, a landscape of horror and loss. Could the painting be a clue? Was it a depiction of the place where Pierre Martin had gone missing? Was it a place he had loved, a place he had longed to return to? She traced the lines of the painting with her finger, her mind racing, trying to piece together the fragments of information. She remembered Monsieur Dubois, the gallery owner, mentioning that the painting had been acquired from a local dealer in Verdun shortly after the war. He had said it was part of a collection of works salvaged from a bombed-out chateau, a chateau that had been used as a temporary headquarters by the French army. A chateau, a headquarters, Verdun. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, albeit in a fragmented, disjointed way. Amélie felt a surge of adrenaline, a sense of urgency that propelled her forward. She had to go to Verdun. She had to see the landscape for herself, to retrace the steps of Lieutenant Pierre Martin, to find the answers that lay hidden in the echoes of the war. She decided to visit Madame Dubois first. She wanted to know more details about the painting's provenance, about anything the dealer may know. Walking the familiar street, a new energy invigorated her. The walk was not far, but the thoughts that accompanied her were distant, traveling to battles and times lost. Madame Dubois opened the door, her lined face crinkled in a welcoming smile. She ushered Amélie into the small, tidy apartment, full of little touches. "Amélie, my dear, what a lovely surprise."
Come in, come in.
"I just made some tea." Amélie accepts, and once settled with a fragrant cup, she recounts her findings, the note, the photograph, and her theory about the landscape. Madame Dubois listens intently, her eyes widening with each detail. When Amélie finishes, she sits in silence for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. "Pierre Martin," she murmurs, the name sounding like a distant echo. "The dealer, he did mention something about a soldier, a young officer who was attached to the chateau. He said the painting was found in the officer's quarters, amongst his personal belongings." She pauses, her gaze drifting towards a framed photograph on the mantelpiece, a photograph of a young man in uniform. Amélie's breath catches in her throat. "It's him. It's Pierre Martin." "That's him," Amélie whispers, her voice barely audible. "That's Lieutenant Martin." Madame Dubois nods slowly. "Yes," she says softly. "That's my nephew, Antoine. He served with Lieutenant Martin. He didn't come back." A heavier silence settles. The air is thick. "But Antoine spoke of the lieutenant," Madame Dubois started again. "He held him very high regard. He said he was a kind man, a good officer, and that he was very fond of a nurse. He wouldn't name her.
But
He said the lieutenant kept a picture." A sudden chill ran through Amélie, and she felt a deep sense that her life was about to shift into a different gear. Chapter 3. The Curator's Secret and the Lieutenant's File. The chill that ran through Amélie wasn't just from the Parisian spring air seeping through the cracks in Madame Dubois' window frame. It was the icy premonition of a truth about to surface, a truth buried beneath layers of wartime secrecy and personal grief. The photograph on the mantelpiece, the casual mention of a nurse, the on the back of Pierre's photo, it was all converging, pointing towards a connection she couldn't yet comprehend, but deeply felt. Madame Dubois, seeing Amélie's pale face, reached out and took her hand. "My dear, you look as though you've seen a ghost. Perhaps this tea is too strong. Or perhaps you know more than you're letting on." Amélie hesitated. She had come seeking information, not to reveal her own vulnerabilities. But Madame Dubois' knowing gaze, the shared grief in her eyes, the unspoken understanding between two women who had lived through the horrors of war, compelled her to speak. "I think I might have known him," Amélie confessed, her voice trembling. I was a nurse at a field hospital near Verdun. In 1916, the year he went missing. Madame Du Bois nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and understanding. Antoine spoke of the hospital. He said many of the men from their battalion were taken there. He himself was wounded just a few weeks before she trailed off, her voice choked with emotion. The dealer, Amélie continued, her voice gaining strength, he said the painting was found in Lieutenant Martin's quarters. At the chateau. Do you know which chateau? Madame Du Bois rose and walked to a small, antique writing desk. She rummaged through a drawer, pulling out a faded, leather-bound journal. Antoine kept a diary, she explained. He wrote about everything, the battles, the men he served with, his hopes, his fears. He mentioned the chateau several times. It was called Chateau de Valois.
Chateau de Valois.
The name resonated with Amélie, a faint echo of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. She had heard it before. She was sure of it.
But where?
And when? Madame Du Bois opened the journal, her fingers tracing the faded ink. Here it is, she said, pointing to an entry dated May 1916. Antoine writes about arriving at Chateau de Valois. He describes it as a grand, imposing building, slightly damaged by shelling, but still habitable. He mentions Lieutenant Martin being assigned a room on the second floor, overlooking the gardens. Amélie felt a surge of excitement. This was it. This was the connection. She had to go to Chateau de Valois. She had to see the place where Pierre Martin had lived, where he had perhaps painted the landscape, where he had written the mysterious note. Madame Du Bois, Amélie said, her voice filled with a newfound determination, I must go to Verdun. To the chateau. Would you be willing to lend me Antoine's journal? It might help me understand. Madame Du Bois hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching Amélie's face. She saw the desperation, the yearning, the flicker of hope that had been rekindled. She saw, perhaps, a reflection of her own grief, her own longing for answers. Take it, she said softly, handing Amélie the journal. But be careful, my dear. The past can be a dangerous place, and some secrets are best left buried. Amélie thanked her, her heart filled with gratitude and a growing sense of trepidation. She knew Madame Du Bois was right. The past could be dangerous, but she couldn't turn back now. She had to follow the thread, unravel the mystery, even if it led her to heartbreak. Before leaving, Amélie decided to make one more stop, the office of Monsieur Armand, the curator of the military museum, a man known for his encyclopedic knowledge of the war and his vast collection of artifacts. She had met him briefly during her research at the archives, and he had seemed intrigued by her interest in Lieutenant Martin. She found Monsieur Armand in his cluttered office, surrounded by stacks of books, maps, and military paraphernalia. He greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling behind his thick spectacles. Madame Rousseau, he said, I was wondering when I would see you again. You have a fascinating quest, searching for a lost lieutenant. Amélie explained her findings, the note, the photograph, the chateau, and Antoine's journal. Monsieur Armand listened intently, his expression growing increasingly serious. Chateau de Valois, he murmured, stroking his chin. Yes, I know it well. It played a significant role in the Battle of Verdun. It was used as a command post, a hospital, and a holding area for prisoners of war. A holding area for prisoners of war, a new layer of complexity, a new shadow of doubt, crept into Amélie's mind. Lieutenant Martin, Monsieur Armand continued, was a somewhat controversial figure. There were rumors, whispers about his activities. Nothing was ever proven, of course. But there were some who believed he was involved in intelligence work. He then proceeded to pull a file from a locked cabinet. This is not for public viewing, he stated in a serious tone, but it contains details beyond the basic information. Amélie's hand trembles.
He was a spy? She asked.
Monsieur Armand hesitated. Let's just say he walked a fine line. And in war, Madame Rousseau, the lines between loyalty and betrayal, between duty and love, can become very blurred indeed. He opens the file. There is a name here. A woman. Listed as. Contact. Initial AR. Amelie felt like the floor has dropped out. Chapter 4. A Journey to the Trenches of Remembrance. The initials AR hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, like the chlorine gas that had once choked the battlefields of Verdun. Amélie Rousseau. Her initials. In a confidential file, linked to Lieutenant Pierre Martin. A man accused of what? Espionage? Treason? The implications were staggering, a whirlwind of confusion and disbelief that threatened to overwhelm her. Monsieur Armand, observing her reaction, placed a calming hand on her arm. Madame Rousseau, please understand, this is merely an annotation. A contact. It doesn't necessarily imply anything untoward. It could be a simple coincidence. A different AR. But Amélie knew, deep in her heart, that it wasn't a coincidence. The whispered note, the on the photograph, Antoine's journal, the chateau, and now this, it was all connected, a tapestry of interwoven threads that led back to her, to a past she had thought buried, a past she had desperately tried to forget. She looked at Monsieur Armand, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I need to see this file, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I need to understand. Monsieur Armand hesitated. He was bound by duty, by the rules of his profession. But he also saw the desperation in Amélie's eyes, the raw emotion that emanated from her. He saw a woman on the edge, a woman teetering on the precipice of a truth that could shatter her world. I cannot allow you to take it, he said softly. But I can allow you to read it here. Under my supervision, of course. Amélie nodded, her gratitude overwhelming. She sat down at a small table, the confidential file spread before her. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded, but the words leaped out at her, each one a blow to her carefully constructed reality. The file detailed Lieutenant Martin's movements, his assignments, his contacts. It spoke of his fluency in German, his ability to move between the lines, his uncanny knack for gathering information. It also spoke of his growing disillusionment with the war, his questioning of authority, his increasingly reckless behavior. And then there were the entries mentioning AR. Coded messages, clandestine meetings, whispered conversations in the shadows. The entries were vague, deliberately ambiguous, but they painted a picture of a dangerous liaison, a relationship that straddled the line between duty and betrayal. Amélie read with a growing sense of horror and fascination. She recognized some of the locations, mentioned the ruined church near the hospital, the abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of Verdun, the small cafe where she had often gone for a moment of respite from the endless stream of wounded. She remembered fragments of conversations, fleeting encounters, a shared glance across a crowded room, a touch of a hand that lingered a moment too long. She had dismissed them at the time as insignificant, the casual interactions of wartime, the desperate need for human connection in a world of death and despair. But now, seen through the lens of this confidential file, they took on a new, sinister meaning. Had she been unwittingly involved in something dangerous? Had she been used? Or had she, perhaps, been more than a mere contact? Had she loved him? The thought struck her with the force of a physical blow. She closed her eyes, trying to shut out the swirling emotions, the painful memories that were flooding back. She remembered the exhaustion, the fear, the constant threat of death. She remembered the camaraderie, the shared sacrifices, the desperate hope for a better future. And she remembered a feeling, a warmth, a connection, a spark of something that had transcended the horrors of the war. She had buried it deep, locked it away in the darkest recesses of her heart, convinced herself that it had been nothing more than a fleeting illusion, a product of the madness that had engulfed them all. But now, confronted with this evidence, she could no longer deny it. She had known Pierre Martin, and she had loved him. Leaving Monsieur Armand's office, Amélie felt numb, disoriented, as if she had stepped into a different world. The Parisian streets seemed alien, the bustling crowds, the noise and activity, a jarring contrast to the silent, haunted world of the past that she had just re-entered. She knew what she had to do. She had to go to Verdun. She had to visit Chateau de Valois. She had to confront the ghosts of her past, to face the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She boards a train the very next morning. The journey is long and is a blur. Her mind is entirely focused on what awaits. Arriving in Verdun, she is struck by the desolation. Even though the war had ended, the scars were everywhere: shattered buildings, cratered fields, the ever-present sense of loss that hung in the air like a shroud. She hires a car, a rickety old vehicle driven by a taciturn veteran with a missing arm and a haunted look in his eyes. She had asked him to take her to Chateau de Valois. As they drive through the ravaged countryside, Amelie feels a growing sense of dread, a premonition of what she might find. The landscape, once beautiful, now bore the marks of unimaginable violence: trenches, barbed wire, the skeletal remains of trees, the silent testament to the horrors that had unfolded here. And then, in the distance, she sees its Chateau de Valois, a grand, imposing building, perched on a hilltop, overlooking the valley. It was still standing, but it was badly damaged, its walls scarred by shellfire, its windows shattered, its roof partially collapsed. It was a ghost of its former glory, a silent witness to the ravages of war. As they approach the entrance, she sees someone is standing there, seemingly awaiting. Chapter 5. The Nurse Who Knew Too Much. The figure standing at the entrance of Chateau de Valois was not a ghost, as Amelie had momentarily feared, but a woman. She was tall and slender, her hair, once of vibrant auburn, now streaked with gray, pulled back severely from a face etched with the lines of time and hardship. She wore a simple, dark dress, and her posture was erect, almost defiant, despite the evident weariness in her eyes. As Amelie's car drew closer, the woman stepped forward, her gaze fixed on the approaching vehicle. There was a recognition in her eyes, a flicker of something that mirrored Amelie's own sense of apprehension and anticipation. The driver, sensing the unspoken tension, stopped the car a short distance from the chateau entrance. Amelie stepped out, her legs feeling unsteady, her heart pounding in her chest. She walked towards the woman, each step a deliberate effort, a crossing of a threshold into a past she had long tried to escape. "You are Madame Rousseau, I presume?" the woman said, her voice low and husky, with a slight accent Amelie couldn't quite place. Amelie nodded, her voice caught in her throat. "And you are?" "My name is Genevieve Dubois," the woman replied. "I was a friend of Pierre's. I received your letter." Amelie was taken aback. "My letter? I didn't send a letter." Genevieve's eyebrows rose slightly.
"No?"
"But I was informed you were coming, that you were seeking information about Pierre, about the events that occurred here." A wave of confusion washed over Amelie, who had informed Genevieve of her arrival.
"And why?"
Was this a trap? A carefully orchestrated encounter designed to what? Silence her? Intimidate her? She remembered Monsieur Armand's warning. Some secrets are best left buried. And Madame Dubois, adding, "The past can be a dangerous place." "I came to find answers," Amelie said, her voice trembling slightly. "About Pierre. About my connection to him." Genevieve studied her intently, her eyes searching Amelie's face, as if trying to decipher her motives, her sincerity. "You were a nurse," she said, a statement rather than a question. "At the field hospital. You treated him." Amelie nodded. I believe so. But I don't remember. It was a chaotic time." So many wounded. Genevieve's expression softened slightly. "Yes," she said softly. "It was a chaotic time.
"For all of us."
She paused, then added, "Pierre spoke of you. He said you were kind, compassionate. He said you saved his life." Amelie felt a pang of emotion, a bittersweet ache in her heart. He had remembered her. Even after all these years, after all the horrors he had endured, he had remembered her. "I found a note," Amelie continued, pulling the crumpled piece of paper from her coat pocket. "In a painting. He wrote, 'I await you beyond the veil.'" Genevieve took the note, her fingers tracing the faded ink. Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "He had a poetic soul, Pierre," she said softly, "even in the midst of war." "And the photograph," Amelie added, showing Genevieve the faded image of Pierre. "My initial on the back." Do you know anything about that? Genevieve's gaze lingered on the photograph, her expression unreadable. He kept it with him always, she said quietly. He said it was a reminder of hope, of a future he longed for. She looked at the back. The initial.
He never said.
He guarded the secret well. A silence fell between them, a silence filled with unspoken questions, unspoken emotions. The wind whispered through the shattered windows of the chateau, carrying the echoes of the past, the ghosts of the soldiers who had once walked these grounds. Come, Genevieve said, breaking the silence. Let us walk. There is much to tell you, and much for you to see. She led Amelie towards the chateau, her hand lightly touching Amelie's arm, a gesture of guidance, of shared grief, of a connection forged in the crucible of war. As they entered the ruined building, Amelie felt a sense of trepidation, a feeling that she was stepping into a world of shadows, of secrets, of truths that could shatter her carefully constructed reality. The interior of the chateau was a scene of devastation, collapsed ceilings, crumbling walls, shattered furniture, the remnants of a life that had been brutally interrupted. But amidst the destruction, there were signs of the past, echoes of the people who had once lived and worked here. Genevieve led her through the main hall, pointing out the remnants of a grand ballroom, a library with its books scattered and torn, a dining room where the table was still set for a meal that had never been eaten. This was where Pierre had his quarters, Genevieve said, stopping at a doorway on the second floor. The room was small, but it had a large window overlooking the gardens, now overgrown and wild. The view was breathtaking, a stark contrast to the devastation within. Amelie stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. There was a small bed, a desk littered with papers, a bookshelf with a few remaining volumes. And on the wall, above the desk, there was an empty space, a rectangle of lighter paint where a picture had once hung. The landscape. He kept it there, Genevieve said, her voice barely a whisper. He would look at it for hours. He said it reminded him of home.
Of peace.
Amelie felt a lump in her throat, a wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She could almost see him, standing at the window, gazing at the landscape, dreaming of a future that had been stolen from him. And the woman with him. Was it Genevieve? Was it her? Genevieve, Amelie started, voice quivering. Who told you I was coming? The other woman sighed. A man. He left just before you arrived. He said he was a friend of yours, a Monsieur Armand. Amelie is startled. She realizes she is being carefully monitored. She can't shake a feeling of unease. Chapter 6. Letters from a Lost Love and a Hidden Betrayal. Monsieur Armand's unexpected involvement cast a long shadow over Amelie's already fraught journey. Why would he alert Genevieve of her arrival? What was his game? Was he a protector, a manipulator, or something in between? The curator's words echoed in her mind. He walked a fine line. The lines between loyalty and betrayal, it can become very blurred. Was Armand blurring those lines himself? Genevieve, seemingly unaware of Amelie's inner turmoil, continued to guide her through the chateau, her narrative weaving a tapestry of Pierre's life and the clandestine activities that had unfolded within those walls. She spoke of coded messages, secret meetings, and the constant threat of discovery. She spoke of Pierre's courage, his idealism, and his growing disillusionment with the war's senseless brutality. He believed in a better world, Genevieve said, her voice filled with a mixture of pride and sorrow. He believed that even in the darkest of times, there was still hope. But he also knew the risks. He knew that one wrong move could cost him everything. They reached a small, hidden room, tucked away behind the library. It was a secret chamber, accessible only through a concealed door disguised as a bookshelf. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. There was a small table, a chair, and a locked wooden chest. This was his sanctuary, Genevieve said. This was where he kept his most sensitive documents, his secrets. She produced a small, ornate key from a chain around her neck. I have kept this safe, she said, her voice trembling slightly. For all these years, I promised him I would protect his legacy. She unlocked the chest, her hands shaking with emotion. Inside, there were stacks of papers, letters, maps, and photographs. It was a treasure trove of wartime secrets, a glimpse into the hidden world of espionage and intrigue. "These are his letters," Genevieve said, carefully lifting a bundle of envelopes tied together with a faded ribbon. "To various people. Some coded, some not.
Some to you."
Amelie's heart skipped a beat. Letters to her? From Pierre? She reached out, her fingers trembling, and took the bundle. The envelopes were addressed in a familiar handwriting, the same handwriting as the note she had found in the painting. Her name, Amélie Rousseau, was written on each one, in a bold, confident script. She opened one of the letters, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper. The date was June 1916, just a few months before he went missing. The words were written in French, a language she understood fluently, but the meaning was veiled, obscured by code words and allusions. "My dearest A, the shadows grow longer, and the nightingale sings a mournful song. The raven circles above, its eyes watching, its beak sharp. I long for the dawn, for the light that will banish the darkness. But I fear the dawn may never come. I hold your image close, a beacon in the storm. Await me, my love, beyond the veil. Yours eternally, P." Amélie felt a chill run down her spine. The letter was both beautiful and terrifying. It spoke of love, of longing, of a desperate hope for a future that seemed increasingly unlikely. But it also spoke of danger, of betrayal, of a world where trust was a luxury no one could afford. She opened another letter, and another, each one a mixture of passionate declarations and cryptic warnings. She began to piece together the fragments of their relationship, the stolen moments, the whispered conversations, the shared fears and hopes. She remembered the touch of his hand, the warmth of his gaze, the way he had made her feel alive, even in the midst of death and despair. She remembered the risks they had taken, the secrets they had shared, the bond that had formed between them, a bond that had transcended the boundaries of war and duty. But amidst the letters of love, there was a darker thread, a hint of betrayal, a suggestion that Pierre had been playing a dangerous game, a game that had ultimately cost him his life. One letter, in particular, caught her attention. It was dated just a few days before he went missing. It was addressed to someone identified only as M. "I have discovered the truth. The serpent is in our midst. He is closer than we think. I fear I have been compromised. I must act quickly. If I do not return, tell her everything. P." Amélie's blood ran cold. The serpent, who was it? And what had Pierre discovered? Had he been betrayed? By whom? And what was the everything he wanted her to know? "Genevieve," Amélie said, her voice shaking. "Who is M?" Genevieve looked at her, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and fear. I don't know," she said softly. "Pierre never told me. He kept some secrets even from me." "But the serpent," Amélie persisted. "He was betrayed, wasn't he?" Genevieve hesitated, her gaze drifting towards the window, towards the overgrown gardens where Pierre had once walked. "There were rumors," she said quietly. "Whispers that someone close to him, someone he trusted, had betrayed him to the enemy." Genevieve reveals that one of the rumors implicated a high-ranking official who was later cleared after Pierre's disappearance. But another rumor was that of a nurse close to him. Amélie's mind is reeling. The accusations are pointed at her. But how can this be? She looks at the date on the final letter. It was the day before she was transferred to a different hospital. A sudden, painful memory flashes before Amélie's eyes, a whispered conversation, a clandestine meeting, a coded message she had delivered unknowingly to a German officer posing as a wounded French soldier. She had been used, a pawn in a deadly game, and Pierre had paid the ultimate price. The chateau suddenly seems darker, dangerous. Chapter 7. The Shadow of the Spy and the Stolen Locket. The realization hit Amélie with the force of a physical blow, a crushing weight that stole her breath and left her reeling. She, the compassionate nurse, The woman who had dedicated her life to healing had been an unwitting instrument of betrayal, a pawn in a game of espionage that had cost Pierre his life. The memory, long suppressed, now flooded back with agonizing clarity. The German officer, his charming smile, his feigned injuries, the coded message she had delivered, believing it to be a harmless request from a fellow soldier. She stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth, a silent scream trapped in her throat. Genevieve, seeing her distress, rushed to her side, her eyes filled with concern. "Amelie,
What is it?
what's wrong?" Amelie couldn't speak, her mind racing, trying to make sense of the fragmented memories, the horrifying implications. She had been so naive, so trusting, so blinded by the desperation of war that she had failed to see the deception, the danger that lurked beneath the surface. She sank into the chair, her body trembling uncontrollably. The letters, the photographs, the secrets of the hidden room, they all seemed to mock her now, a testament to her own culpability, her own unwitting betrayal. I remember," she whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. "A German officer at the hospital. He asked me to deliver a message. A coded message. I thought he was one of ours. A wounded soldier. I didn't know." Genevieve's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "A German officer?" she said sharply. "At the hospital? You delivered a message for him?" Amelie nodded, tears streaming down her face. It was a small, folded piece of paper.
He said it was for his family.
He said he couldn't trust anyone else." Genevieve's face paled. "What did the message say?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Amelie shook her head. "I don't know. It was coded. I couldn't read it. But I remember the officer's eyes. He had a strange look in his eyes. A look of triumph. I didn't understand it at the time, but now I do." Genevieve turned away, her body rigid with anger and grief. "You fool," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You naive, trusting fool. You condemned him. You condemned him to death." Amelie recoiled, stung by the harshness of Genevieve's words, but she knew they were true. She had been a fool, and her foolishness had cost Pierre everything. I didn't know," Amelie repeated, her voice pleading. "I swear I didn't know." Genevieve turned back to her, her eyes blazing with fury. "Ignorance is no excuse," she said coldly, "especially in war, especially when lives are at stake." She paced the room, her anger radiating off her in waves.
"Pierre trusted you," she said.
"He loved you, and you betrayed him." Amelie felt a wave of despair wash over her. She had lost everything. Her husband, her innocence, and now, the memory of the man she had loved, the man she had unknowingly betrayed. "There's more," Genevieve said, her voice softening slightly, but still laced with bitterness. "Something was stolen. From Pierre. The night he disappeared. A locket. A silver locket with your picture inside." Amelie's heart skipped a beat. A locket? Her picture? She remembered Pierre had shown it to her once, a fleeting glimpse of a silver locket, a treasured possession he kept close to his heart. He had said it was a gift from his mother, but he had lied. "The German officer," Amelie whispered. "He must have taken it. As proof. Of my involvement." Genevieve nodded. "It was never found. It was as if he vanished into thin air. Along with the locket. And Pierre." A sudden thought struck Amelie. Monsieur Armand, the curator. He had known about the locket. He had mentioned it, casually, during their conversation at the museum. He had said there were whispers about a nurse who was close to Lieutenant Martin. Had he known all along? Had he been testing her, probing her, trying to see if she would reveal her guilt? And why had he sent Genevieve the message about her arrival? Was he trying to protect her? Or was he setting her up, leading her into a trap? She stood up, her legs feeling unsteady, but her mind suddenly clear. "I have to go," she said, her voice firm. "I have to find the locket. I have to find the truth." Genevieve looked at her, her anger replaced by a grudging respect. "And how do you propose to do that?"
she asked.
"Monsieur Armand," Amelie replied. "He knows something. I'm sure of it.
He's the key.
She turned to leave, her heart heavy with grief and guilt, but also with a flicker of determination. She had made a terrible mistake, a mistake that had cost Pierre his life. But she wouldn't let it define her. She would find the locket, she would uncover the truth, and she would, somehow, find a way to atone for her sins. As she walks out of the chateau, she sees the driver is gone. But next to where the car was parked is a small, silver object glinting in the sun. It's a locket. Chapter 8. A rendezvous in the ruined church. The silver locket lay on the ground, gleaming in the sunlight like a fallen star, a beacon of hope amidst the ruins of Amelie's world. It was undeniably Pierre's locket, the one Genevieve had described, the one that held her picture, the one that had been stolen on the night of his disappearance. Its presence here, at Château de Valois, was no accident. It was a message, a clue, a deliberate act. But by whom? And for what purpose? Amelie picked it up, her fingers trembling as she traced the intricate carvings on its surface. It was cold to the touch, yet it radiated a strange warmth, a connection to the past, to the man she had loved and betrayed. She opened it, her heart pounding in her chest, and there, inside, was her picture, a faded image of her younger self, her eyes bright with hope and innocence, a stark contrast to the weary, guilt-ridden woman she had become. On the opposite side of the locket, where Pierre had told her his mother's portrait was secured, now was an inscription, etched in tiny, elegant letters. St. Michael's, midnight, May 15th, St. Michael's. The ruined church near the hospital. The place where she had met Pierre secretly, for fleeting moments of stolen intimacy, whispered conversations in the shadows. The place that was mentioned in his confidential file, the place that held both cherished memories and the seeds of her devastating mistake. May 15th. That was tonight. Midnight. The witching hour. A time for secrets, for rendezvous, for confrontations. It was a trap, she knew. A carefully orchestrated plan to what? Expose her? Silence her? Or perhaps offer her a chance at redemption. She clutched the locket tightly in her hand, her mind racing. Who had left it here? Monsieur Armand? Genevieve? Or someone else entirely, someone she didn't even know, someone who had been watching her, manipulating her, pulling the strings of her life like a puppet master? She looked around, her eyes scanning the deserted grounds of the chateau. The driver was gone, the car vanished, leaving her stranded, isolated, vulnerable. She was alone, with nothing but the locket and the cryptic message it contained.
She had a choice.
She could run, disappear, try to escape the past and its relentless pursuit. Or she could face her demons, confront the truth, and walk into the trap, knowing that it could cost her everything. She thought of Pierre, his smiling face, his unwavering belief in a better world, his desperate plea. Tell her everything. She thought of her own guilt, her own complicity, her own desperate need for atonement. She made her decision. She would go to St. Michael's. She would meet whoever was waiting for her. She would face the consequences of her actions, and she would, finally, uncover the truth. She started walking, her steps determined, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. The road was long and winding, the landscape scarred by war, a constant reminder of the devastation she had helped to unleash. As she walked, she tried to make sense of the tangled web of events, the conflicting loyalties, the hidden betrayals. Monsieur Armand's involvement was the most puzzling. He had seemed genuinely interested in helping her, in uncovering the truth about Pierre. But his actions alerting Genevieve, the confidential file, the locket suggested a deeper, more complex agenda. Was he trying to protect her? Or was he using her to flesh out the real traitor, the serpent who had betrayed Pierre? She reached the outskirts of Verdun as dusk began to settle, casting long shadows over the ruined buildings and the deserted streets. The town was eerily silent, the air thick with the ghosts of the past. St. Michael's Church stood on a small hill overlooking the town, a skeletal silhouette against the darkening sky. It had been badly damaged by shelling, its roof collapsed, its walls crumbling, its stained glass windows shattered. It was a place of desolation, a symbol of the shattered faith and broken dreams of a generation. As Amelie approached the church, she felt a growing sense of unease, a premonition of danger. The air was heavy with anticipation, the silence broken only by the rustling of the wind through the broken windows and the distant hoot of an owl. She reached the entrance, a gaping hole in the crumbling wall, and hesitated. She could still turn back. She could still escape. But she knew she couldn't. She had come too far. She had to see this through. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The interior of the church was dark and cavernous, the moonlight filtering through the broken roof, casting eerie shadows on the floor. The air was cold and damp, the scent of decay heavy in her nostrils. She moved slowly, cautiously, her eyes scanning the darkness, searching for any sign of movement, any indication of who was waiting for her. And then she saw him, standing in the shadows near the altar. A figure emerged, tall and imposing, his face obscured by the darkness. Madame Rousseau, a voice said, a voice she recognized instantly. I have been expecting you. It was Monsieur Armand.
But why?
She asks, the one question that has been burning in her mind. She steps forward. Monsieur Armand steps into the light. He looks weary, a tired man. Because, Amelie, it is time for the truth to be revealed. He holds out his hand. In it is a small, worn photograph. It is Pierre in his uniform. But on the back is written, not an A, but M. Dada. Monsieur Armand. Chapter 9. The Price of Duty and the Whispers of Treason. The photograph, with its M.A. inscription, turned Amelie's world upside down. Monsieur Armand, the seemingly helpful curator, the man who had guided her research, was M. The mysterious contact in Pierre's letters, the person Pierre had entrusted with his final message. But what did it all mean? Was Armand a friend, a foe, or something in between? I don't understand, Amelie stammered, her voice trembling. You were M?
But why?
Why didn't you tell me before? Monsieur Armand sighed, his shoulders slumping with a weariness that seemed to transcend the physical. There were reasons, he said softly. Reasons of duty, of secrecy, of self-preservation. He stepped closer, the moonlight illuminating his face, revealing the lines of age and the burden of secrets he had carried for so long. Pierre and I, we were more than colleagues, he confessed. We were friends, brothers in arms. We shared a common goal to end the war, to expose the corruption and the betrayal that were prolonging the suffering. But the serpent, Amelie said, her voice barely a whisper. Pierre wrote about a serpent. Someone who betrayed him.
Was it you?
Monsieur Armand shook his head, his eyes filled with a deep sadness.
No, Amélie. It wasn't me.
I swear it. I would have given my life for Pierre. Then who? Amelie pleaded. Who betrayed him? Monsieur Armand hesitated, his gaze drifting towards the broken altar, towards the shadows that seemed to hold the secrets of the past. It was General Dubois, he said finally, the name spoken like a curse. General Dubois. Madame Dubois' brother.
Antoine Essec.
The high-ranking officer who had been briefly suspected, then cleared, after Pierre's disappearance. The man who had seemingly escaped justice, while Pierre had paid the ultimate price. Amelie felt a surge of anger, a bitter resentment towards the man who had betrayed Pierre, the man who had used her, an innocent nurse, as a pawn in his deadly game.
But why?
Amelie asked. Why would he betray Pierre? What was his motive? Power, Monsieur Armand replied, his voice laced with disgust.
Greed.
Ambition. He was collaborating with the enemy, selling secrets, profiting from the war. Pierre discovered the truth. He was about to expose him. But Dubois found out. He silenced Pierre.
Permanently.
And the message, Amelie said, remembering the coded message she had delivered to the German officer. What did it say? It was a list, Monsieur Armand replied. A list of names. Of officers, politicians, industrialists who were involved in Dubois' network of corruption. Pierre had gathered the evidence. He was going to use it to bring them all down. And I delivered that list to the enemy, Amelie whispered, the horror of her actions washing over her anew. Yes, Monsieur Armand confirmed. Du Bois used you. He knew Pierre trusted you. He knew you would do anything to help a wounded soldier. He exploited your compassion, your innocence. He turned you into an unwitting accomplice. Amelie felt a wave of nausea, a deep, visceral disgust at her own naivete, her own blindness. She had been so easily manipulated, so easily deceived. But why didn't you tell me all this before? Amelie asked, her voice filled with a mixture of anger and confusion. Why wait until now? Because I had to be sure, Monsieur Armand replied. I had to be sure of you, of your loyalty, of your innocence. But the locket, Amelie said, clutching the silver locket in her hand. Why did you leave it at the chateau? Why bring me here? The locket was a test, Monsieur Armand admitted. A way to see if you would remember, if you would understand, if you would come here. And Genevieve, Amelie said. You told her I was coming.
Why?
Genevieve is my sister, Monsieur Armand revealed. She was Pierre's confidant, his lover. She knew about his work. She knew about the risks. She has been waiting for justice, for Pierre, for you. Amelie felt as if she had been living in a fabricated reality. But why tell me now? Amelie persisted. Because the war is over, Monsieur Armand replied. But the fight for justice is not. Du Bois is still alive. He is still powerful. He still has influence. I need your help, Amelie. To expose him. To bring him to justice. To avenge Pierre. He holds out a hand. Will you help me, Amelie? Amelie looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and determination. She had been betrayed, manipulated, used. But she had also loved, and she had lost. She had a chance, finally, to atone for her sins, to right the wrongs of the past, to bring justice to the man she had loved and the man who had betrayed him. She has a choice to make. Chapter 10. Escape through the underground tunnels. Amelie's hand hesitated, hovering over Monsieur Armand's outstretched palm. Trust, once freely given, now felt like a treacherous currency, its value eroded by betrayal and deceit. Could she trust him? Could she believe his story, his plea for help? Or was this another manipulation, another layer of the intricate web that had ensnared her? She looked into his eyes, searching for any sign of deception, any flicker of doubt. She saw weariness, yes, and the burden of secrets, but she also saw a glimmer of hope, a spark of determination that mirrored her own. She saw, perhaps, the ghost of Pierre, urging her on, guiding her towards the truth. She made her decision. She would trust him.
For now.
She would take a leap of faith, a desperate gamble in a game where the stakes were higher than ever. She placed her hand in his, her fingers clasping as firmly. I will help you, she said, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her heart. I will help you bring Du Bois to justice. For Pierre. For myself. For all those who suffered because of his greed. Monsieur Armand's grip tightened on hers, a silent acknowledgement of their pact, their shared commitment to a dangerous and uncertain path. Thank you, Amelie, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. I know this is not easy. I know you have been through much. But together, we can do this. We can expose Du Bois and his network of corruption. But how? Amelie asked. He is powerful. He has connections. He will be protected. He is not invulnerable, Monsieur Armand replied. He has made enemies. He has left a trail of broken promises and betrayed loyalties. We will find those enemies. We will gather the evidence. We will expose him. He led her towards the back of the church, towards a crumbling wall hidden behind the altar. There is a way, he said.
Un secret passage.
It leads to an underground network of tunnels. Tunnels that were used during the war to move troops, supplies, and information. He pressed a hidden lever, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a dark, narrow opening. The air that rushed out was cold and damp, carrying the scent of earth and decay. These tunnels they connect to various parts of the town, Monsieur Armand explained. including Du Bois' estate. Amelie felt a chill run down her spine. This was dangerous. This was reckless. But it was also their only chance. We must be careful, Monsieur Armand warned. Du Bois has eyes and ears everywhere. He will be watching, waiting. We must be invisible. They entered the tunnel, the darkness swallowing them whole. Monsieur Armand lit a small lantern, its flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the damp stone walls. The air was thick and heavy, the silence broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water and the scuttling of unseen creatures. As they walked, Monsieur Armand explained his plan. They would use the tunnels to gather information, to contact Du Bois' enemies, to build a case against him that was so strong, so irrefutable, that even his powerful connections couldn't protect him. We will start with Madame Beaumont, Monsieur Armand said. She was one of Du Bois' victims. He ruined her family. He stole her fortune. She has been waiting for a chance to take revenge. Amelie remembered Madame Beaumont, a wealthy widow, known for her charitable work, her quiet dignity, her unwavering support for the war effort. She had seemed like a pillar of the community, a symbol of resilience and patriotism. But now Amelie realized she was another piece of the puzzle, another victim of Du Bois' insatiable greed. They walked for what seemed like hours, the tunnel twisting and turning, branching off in different directions. Amelie felt a growing sense of claustrophobia, a feeling of being trapped, buried alive. But she pushed her fear aside, focusing on the task ahead, on the promise she had made to Pierre, to herself. Finally, they reached a small, hidden chamber. Monsieur Armand extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. He pressed his ear against the wall, listening intently. "We are beneath Madame Beaumont's house," he whispered. "There is a secret entrance. A hidden door. It leads to her library." Suddenly, they heard a noise. Footsteps. "Someone is coming. Hide." Monsieur Armand whispers urgently. They quickly duck behind a large pile of rubble, holding their breath, their hearts pounding in their chests. The footsteps grew closer, louder, until they stopped just outside the chamber. A voice, muffled but recognizable, spoke. "Are you sure this is the place?" It was General Du Bois. Amelie felt a surge of fear, a desperate urge to flee. But she knew they were trapped. There was nowhere to go. Another voice, softer, more cautious, replied, "Yes, General. I am sure. This is where the informant said he would meet us." Informant? Who were they talking about? Was this another trap? Du Bois' voice, filled with impatience, cut through the darkness. "Well, where is he? I haven't got all night." The other voice hesitated. I don't know, General. He should be here by now." A tense silence filled the chamber, broken only by the sound of Du Bois' heavy breathing and the frantic beating of Amelie's heart. She could feel Monsieur Armand's hand on her arm, a silent warning to stay quiet, to stay hidden. The general makes an impatient sound, then a click, presumably of a lighter. "Let's smoke while we wait. If he dares make me wait too long, he will pay." Amelie realizes the danger is far from over. Chapter 11. The General's Daughter and the Forbidden Romance. The acrid smell of cigar smoke wafted through the hidden chamber, a suffocating reminder of General Du Bois' presence just beyond the thin stone wall. Amelie and Monsieur Armand remained frozen, hidden behind the rubble, their bodies tense, their senses on high alert. Every creak, every rustle, every drip of water seemed amplified in the suffocating silence. Du Bois and his companion continued to wait, their conversation a low murmur punctuated by the occasional curse and the clinking of glasses. Amelie strained to hear, trying to decipher their words, hoping to glean some clue, some information that could help them in their perilous quest. "This informant," Du Bois said, his voice slurring slightly, "he claims to have evidence. Evidence that could damage me. He wants money. A lot of money." The companion's voice was cautious, almost fearful. "Do you trust him, General?" Du Bois chuckled, a harsh, humorless sound. "Trust? In this business, trust is a luxury we cannot afford. I will play along. Get the evidence. And then silence him. Permanently." Amelie's blood ran cold. They were walking into a trap, a carefully orchestrated ambush designed to eliminate anyone who threatened Dubois' power and position. The informant was likely a pawn, a sacrificial lamb in Dubois' deadly game. Suddenly, a new voice broke through the darkness, a voice that was both familiar and unexpected. "Father? What are you doing here?" It was a woman's voice, young, clear, and laced with a hint of confusion and concern. Amelie felt a jolt of recognition. It was Genevieve's voice. But what was she doing here? With Dubois? Dubois' voice, instantly transformed, became smooth, almost paternal. "Genevieve, my dear. What a surprise. I was just meeting with a business associate." Genevieve's voice was skeptical. "Here? In this hidden chamber? It's late, Father. And you've been drinking." "Just a small celebration, my dear," Dubois replied, his voice regaining its composure. "A successful deal. Nothing for you to worry about." Amelie's mind raced. Genevieve was Dubois' daughter? The woman she had confided in, the woman who had claimed to be Pierre's lover, was the daughter of the man who had betrayed him? It was a staggering revelation, a twist of fate that seemed almost impossible to believe. I don't like this, Father," Genevieve said, her voice trembling slightly. "This place, it feels wrong. And that man, he looks dangerous." "Nonsense, my dear," Dubois said, his voice sharp, almost threatening. "You are imagining things. Go back to the house. I will deal with this." There was a moment of silence, a tense standoff between father and daughter. Amelie could feel the conflict, the unspoken emotions that hung heavy in the air. I won't leave you, Father," Genevieve said finally, her voice firm, despite her fear. "Not until I know you're safe." Dubois sighed, his patience wearing thin. "Very well, my dear. But stay out of the way. This is men's business." Amelie's heart sank. Genevieve was walking into danger, unknowingly, unwittingly. She was a pawn in her father's game, just as Amelie had been. But unlike Amelie, Genevieve was bound by blood, by loyalty, by a love that blinded her to the truth. And yet, Amelie couldn't shake the notion that something was off. Genevieve claiming to be Pierre's lover, and now revealed as General Dubois' daughter. It didn't add up. Unless the informant arrived. A man, nervous. "I have what you asked," he stated. "Let's see." Dubois took a small package and started to unwrap it. Genevieve moved closer. "Father, please. I don't like this. Let's go home," she pleaded. But General Dubois was fixated. He opens the package. It's a photo. And letters. The general freezes. This is not what I asked for." Genevieve takes the photo and gasps. It's a picture of her and Pierre. Embracing. The letters are clear. "A romance. Deep and true. He was the love of my life, Father. And you killed him," Genevieve says, a steel in her tone that was never there previously. Amelie is stunned. It was all an elaborate ruse. Genevieve was AR. All along. Chapter 12. A dance of deception at the wartime gala. The revelation hung in the air, heavier than the cigar smoke, more suffocating than the darkness of the hidden chamber. Genevieve, not Amelie, was AR, the woman in Pierre's confidential file, the woman he had loved, the woman who had shared his secrets and his dangerous mission. The elaborate ruse, the carefully constructed facade of grief and betrayal, had been a masterful performance, designed to protect herself and, perhaps, to uncover the truth about Pierre's death. General Dubois, stunned by his daughter's betrayal, stood frozen, the photograph and letters trembling in his hands. His carefully crafted world, built on lies and deception, was crumbling around him, exposed by the very person he had sought to protect. "Genevieve, what is the meaning of this?" He stammered, his voice a mixture of anger and disbelief. Genevieve's voice was cold, unwavering, the voice of a woman who had nothing left to lose. "It means, Father, that I know the truth. I know about your collaboration, your treachery. I know that you murdered Pierre." The companion, forgotten in the drama, shifted nervously, his hand moving towards his weapon. But Genevieve was quicker. She drew a small pistol from her dress pocket, pointing it at her father with a steady hand. "Don't move," she said, her voice sharp, commanding. "This is between us." Dubois' face contorted with rage. "You dare to threaten me? Your own father?" "You are not my father," Genevieve replied, her voice laced with bitterness. "You are a traitor, a murderer, a monster. You killed the man I loved, and you will pay for your crimes." Amelie, watching from the shadows, felt a surge of admiration for Genevieve, for her courage, her strength, her unwavering commitment to justice. She had been wrong about her, terribly wrong. Genevieve was not a pawn, but a player, a force to be reckoned with. "Genevieve, please," Dubois pleaded, his voice losing its arrogance, replaced by a desperate fear. "Don't do this.
We can work this out."
"I can explain." "There is nothing to explain," Genevieve replied. "You betrayed your country. You betrayed your men. You betrayed me. There is no forgiveness for what you have done." She turned to the informant, her pistol still trained on her father.
"You," she said.
"Take the evidence. Go to the authorities. Tell them everything." The informant, sensing an opportunity to escape, nodded eagerly and took the photograph and letters from Genevieve. He scurried away, disappearing into the darkness of the tunnels. Genevieve turned back to her father, her eyes filled with a mixture of sorrow and determination. "It's over, father," she said softly. "Your reign of terror is finished." Monsieur Armand finally moved. "Genevieve," he calls out. She turns, surprised. "Armand?
What?
What are you doing here?" "I am here to help you." He steps into the light, Amelie by his side. "And Madame Rousseau."
"Amelie."
"I thought. It was all a charade." "I needed your help to get close," Genevieve, Amelie explained and told her of the note, and the painting. Monsieur Armand continues. "We needed to make sure. Dubois has many allies. We had to do this carefully, Genevieve. For Pierre." Genevieve looked at them, her eyes softening, the tension easing from her shoulders. She lowered her pistol, her hand trembling. "I understand," she said softly. "I thought I was alone. I thought no one cared." General Dubois took the chance and lunged. He struck Genevieve, knocking the pistol away, and charged towards the exit. Monsieur Armand moved swiftly, blocking his path. A struggle. Brief, but brutal. Monsieur Armand, despite his age, was strong. He had the strength of conviction, fueled by years of waiting, of plotting, of seeking justice. He subdued the general. "It is over, Dubois," Monsieur Armand stated, looking at the man with contempt. "It is finally over." Amelie and Genevieve embrace, two women united by a shared love, a shared loss, and a shared commitment to justice. The scene shifts to a flashback several years before the events in the tunnel. A wartime gala.
Paris.
1915, a lavish affair, filled with officers, politicians, and wealthy socialites. A celebration of patriotism, of national pride, a desperate attempt to mask the horrors of the war that raged just a few hundred miles away. Amelie, younger, more vibrant, is there volunteering as a nurse, attending to the wounded soldiers who had been brought back from the front lines. She is beautiful, radiant, her eyes filled with a naive hope, a belief in the goodness of humanity. Pierre, a young, handsome lieutenant, is also there, escorting Genevieve, his fiancée, the daughter of General Dubois. They are the perfect couple, the epitome of youthful beauty and aristocratic privilege. But beneath the surface, there are tensions, secrets, hidden agendas. Pierre and Genevieve are deeply in love, but their relationship is forbidden, a secret they must keep from her powerful, controlling father. Pierre is also involved in intelligence work, gathering information, exposing corruption, working to undermine the war effort from within. He is walking a dangerous tightrope, risking everything for his beliefs. Amelie and Pierre meet, a chance encounter at the buffet table, a shared glance, a spark of connection that transcends the noise and the chaos of the gala. They talk briefly about the war, about their hopes, their fears. They share a moment of intimacy, a fleeting connection that will change their lives forever. It is the start, And it will lead to the events tonight. Amelie realizes that everything is connected. Everything has been predetermined. Chapter 13. The bloodstained photograph and the unveiling of truth. The flashback faded, leaving Amelie back in the damp, claustrophobic tunnel, the echoes of the wartime gala replaced by the heavy breathing of the subdued General Dubois and the shared, shaky breaths of herself and Genevieve. The past and the present had collided, revealing the intricate web of relationships, betrayals, and sacrifices that had led them to this moment. Monsieur Armand, his face grim, secured Dubois with rope he had found amongst the rubble. The once proud general, now reduced to a defeated, humiliated prisoner, glared at them with a mixture of hatred and fear. "You will regret this," he spat, his voice hoarse with rage. "I have friends. Powerful friends. They will not let this stand. Your friends can no longer help you." "Dubois," Monsieur Armand replied, his voice cold and unwavering. "Your crimes have been exposed. Your reign of terror is over." Genevieve, her face pale but resolute, stepped forward. "It's time, father," she said softly. "It's time to face the consequences of your actions." They left Dubois bound and gagged in the hidden chamber, knowing that the authorities, alerted by the informant, would soon arrive. They emerged from the tunnels, blinking in the pre-dawn light, the fresh air a welcome relief after the suffocating darkness. As they walked towards the town, Amelie felt a sense of closure, a feeling that a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. Pierre had been avenged. Dubois would face justice. And she, finally, had found the truth, however painful it had been. "Thank you, Amelie," Genevieve said, her voice filled with gratitude. "For everything. For helping me uncover the truth. For bringing my father to justice. For avenging Pierre." "I did it for Pierre," Amelie replied. "And for myself. I needed to atone for my mistakes. For my unwitting involvement." "You were not to blame, Amelie," Genevieve said, her hand gently touching Amelie's arm. "You were a victim. Just like Pierre. Just like so many others." They reached the town square, where a small crowd had gathered, alerted by the commotion. Soldiers, police officers, and curious onlookers milled around, whispering amongst themselves. Monsieur Armand handed Genevieve a small, sealed envelope. "This is for you," he said. "It contains everything. The evidence against Dubois. The letters. The photographs. The confession." Genevieve took the envelope, her fingers trembling. "What confession?" she asked. "I confronted Dubois," Monsieur Armand explained. "Before you arrived. I forced him to write down everything. His crimes. His betrayals. His murder of Pierre." Amelie felt a surge of relief, a sense of finality. The truth, the whole truth, was finally out in the open. There would be no more secrets, no more lies, no more deception. As the authorities led Dubois away, his head bowed in shame, his eyes filled with despair, Amelie felt a pang of pity. He was a broken man, stripped of his power, his prestige, his dignity. He was a monster, yes, but he was also a human being capable of love, of loyalty, of betrayal. Genevieve, watching her father being taken away, turned to Amelie, her eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say," she whispered. I hated him for what he did, but he was still my father." Amelie understood. The bonds of family, however twisted, however strained, were not easily broken. She had lost her husband, her love, her innocence. But Genevieve had lost everything. Monsieur Armand stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Genevieve's shoulder. "It's over, Genevieve," he said softly. "It's finally over. You are free. Free from the past. Free from your father's shadow. Free to live your own life." He turned to Amelie, his eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else. Something that looked like respect. "And you, Amelie," he said, "you have been incredibly brave. You have faced your demons. You have found the truth. You have redeemed yourself." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, blood-stained photograph. It was the photograph of Pierre, the one that had been found on his body, the one that had been missing from the military archives. "This belongs to you," he said, handing it to Amelie. It was taken from Pierre. After he was killed. I recovered it. I kept it safe.
For you.
Amélie took the photograph, her fingers tracing the faded image of Pierre's smiling face, the bloodstain a stark reminder of his brutal death. She felt a wave of emotion, a mixture of grief, of love, of gratitude. "Thank you, Armand," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for everything." She looks closely and sees yet another inscription on the back, barely visible beneath the bloodstain. "My heart, my soul, my Amélie." It was not Genevieve's name on the back. It was hers. She finally understood. The AR in the file. It referred to both women. A shared initial, a shared connection to Pierre, a shared love that had been tested, betrayed, and ultimately redeemed. Chapter 14. The Confession in the Camelot Hospital. The blood-stained photograph, with its inscription "My heart, my soul, my Amélie," was the final piece of the puzzle, the ultimate confirmation of Pierre's love, a love that had transcended betrayal, deception, and even death. It was a love that had been hidden, obscured by the fog of war, by the machinations of a corrupt general, and by Amélie's own self-doubt and guilt. But now, finally, it was out in the open, a beacon of hope amidst the ruins of the past. Amélie clutched the photograph to her chest, her tears flowing freely, a mixture of grief and relief, of sorrow and joy. She had been so wrong, so consumed by her own guilt, that she had failed to see the truth, the unwavering love that Pierre had held for her. The shared initial, AR, had been a source of confusion, a deliberate ambiguity that had served to protect both Amélie and Genevieve, two women caught in the crosshairs of a deadly game. It was a testament to Pierre's cunning, his foresight, his determination to protect the women he loved, even at the cost of his own life. With the truth revealed, with Dubois' reign of terror ended, and with Pierre's love finally confirmed, Amélie felt a sense of peace, a feeling that she could finally, after all these years, begin to heal. She decided to return to Paris, to the Galerie Moreau, to the place where her journey had begun, with the whispered note and the ghost of a promise. She needed to close the circle, to put the past to rest, to embrace the future, however uncertain it might be. Before leaving Verdun, she visited the field hospital where she had served during the war, the place where she had first met Pierre, the place where she had unknowingly betrayed him. The hospital, once a bustling hub of activity, a scene of constant chaos and suffering, was now quiet, deserted, a relic of a bygone era. She walked through the empty wards, her footsteps echoing in the silence, the ghosts of the wounded and the dying whispering around her. She remembered the faces, the voices, the smells, the constant fear, the desperate hope. She remembered Pierre. She found the small, Camelot chapel, tucked away at the back of the hospital, the place where she had often sought refuge from the horrors of the war, the place where she had shared stolen moments with Pierre, whispered conversations in the shadows. She lit a candle, its flickering flame casting dancing shadows on the walls, illuminating the stained glass windows, depicting scenes of saints and angels, of suffering and redemption. She sat in one of the pews, the blood-stained photograph clutched in her hand, and she began to speak, to confess, to pour out her heart to the man she had loved and lost. "Pierre," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. I am so sorry. For everything. For my mistakes. For my blindness. For my betrayal. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I was so naive, so trusting, so foolish." She told him about her journey, about her search for the truth, about her encounter with Genevieve, about the discovery of Dubois' treachery, about the final, devastating revelation of his love for her. "I loved you, Pierre," she confessed. "I loved you so much. But I was afraid. Afraid of my feelings. Afraid of the war. Afraid of losing you. And I did lose you. Because of my fear. Because of my mistakes." She wept, her tears falling onto the blood-stained photograph, mingling with the faded image of Pierre's smiling face. She wept for the lost years, for the shattered dreams, for the love that had been cut short by the brutality of war. I will never forget you, Pierre, she vowed. I will carry your memory with me. Always. I will live my life. For you.
For me.
For the future we never had. She felt as if the room responded. The candle flickered, but the room seems brighter. She can't explain it, but she feels at peace. As she spoke, she felt a sense of catharsis, a release of the pent-up emotions, the guilt, the grief, the regret that had weighed her down for so long. She felt forgiven. She felt loved. She felt free. She stayed in the chapel for a long time, until the candle had burned down to a stub, until the first rays of dawn began to filter through the stained glass windows, casting a rainbow of colors onto the walls. She left the hospital, feeling lighter, stronger, more at peace than she had felt in years. She had faced her demons, she had confronted the truth, and she had, finally, found redemption. The war had taken so much, but it had also given. She knew now, with absolute certainty, that Pierre's love had always been, and still was, for her. And hers for him. It was time to move on. To live. Chapter 15. The trial of loyalty and the test of love. Amelie's return to Paris was not a triumphant homecoming, but a quiet, introspective retreat. The city, though bustling with life and the renewed energy of peacetime, felt different now, seen through the lens of her journey, her discoveries, and her hard-won peace. The Galerie Moreau, with its dusty canvases and faded memories, became her sanctuary, a place where she could reflect, heal, and begin to rebuild her life. The news of General Dubois' arrest had spread like wildfire, dominating the headlines and sparking heated debates in the cafes and salons of Paris. The trial was set to be a major event, a public reckoning with the corruption and betrayal that had festered beneath the surface of the war effort. Amelie, though a key witness, decided to remain in the shadows, avoiding the glare of the media and the scrutiny of the public. She had given her testimony to Monsieur Armand, providing him with all the information she had gathered, the letters, the photographs, the blood-stained evidence of Pierre's love. That was enough. She had done her part. She spent her days sorting through the gallery's collection, cataloging the paintings, preparing them for auction. It was a mundane task, but it was therapeutic, a way to occupy her mind, to distract herself from the lingering echoes of the past. One afternoon, as she was examining a small, unremarkable landscape painting, she received a visitor. It was Genevieve. Genevieve, dressed in a simple, elegant dress, looked different than she had during their last encounter in the tunnels beneath Verdun. The harsh lines of anger and grief had softened, replaced by a quiet strength, a resilience that resonated with Amelie's own journey. Amelie, Genevieve said, her voice warm and welcoming. I hope I am not disturbing you. Not at all, Genevieve, Amelie replied, offering her a seat. Please come in. They sat together in the quiet gallery, surrounded by the silent witnesses of the past, the paintings that had once held secrets, now revealed. I wanted to thank you, Genevieve said, her eyes filled with gratitude. For everything. For helping me uncover the truth. For bringing my father to justice. For honoring Pierre's memory. It was the least I could do, Amelie replied. For Pierre. For you. For myself. I also wanted to apologize, Genevieve continued. For deceiving you. For pretending to be someone I wasn't. I understand, Amelie said. You did what you had to do. To protect yourself. To find the truth. It was more than that, Genevieve confessed. I was jealous.
Of you.
Of Pierre's love for you. I wanted to discredit you. To make you doubt yourself. To make you disappear. Amelie nodded, understanding the complex emotions that had driven Genevieve's actions. Jealousy, grief, betrayal, they were powerful forces, capable of twisting even the noblest of hearts. I know now that I was wrong, Genevieve said, her voice trembling slightly. Pierre loved us both. In different ways. But equally. He saw the good in us. He believed in us. Even when we doubted ourselves. They sat in silence for a moment, reflecting on the shared love, the shared loss, the shared journey that had brought them together. The trial, it begins next week, Genevieve said, breaking the silence. I will be testifying against my father. It will not be easy. I know, Amelie said. But you're strong. You will do what is right. Will you be there? Genevieve asked, her eyes searching Amelie's face. Amelie hesitated. She had wanted to avoid the public spectacle, the painful scrutiny, the reliving of the past. But she also knew that she had a duty, a responsibility to bear witness, to stand up for the truth, to honor Pierre's memory. Yes, she said finally. I will be there. I will stand with you. She wouldn't hide. She wouldn't cower. And nor would Genevieve. The two women, once rivals, now allies, bound by a shared past. The trial was a media circus. General Dubois, once a celebrated hero, now a disgraced villain. He pleaded not guilty, maintaining his innocence, blaming others, clinging to the remnants of his shattered reputation. But the evidence was overwhelming. The letters, the photographs, the testimony of Monsieur Armand, of Genevieve, of Amelie, of other witnesses who had come forward, emboldened by their courage. The confession, written in Dubois' own hand, was the final, damning piece of evidence. The verdict was swift.
Guilty.
The sentence, severe. Life imprisonment. Justice finally had been served. As Amelie left the courtroom, she felt a sense of closure, a feeling that a chapter in her life, a chapter filled with pain, with loss, with betrayal, had finally come to an end. But not all chapters had ended. Monsieur Armand approached. Amelie, he started. There is one more thing. He produces a letter. This was found in the general's possessions. It was addressed to you. From Pierre. Amelie's heart skipped a beat. Another letter? From Pierre? What could it possibly say? Chapter 16. The reunion that was never meant to be. The letter, crisp and yellowed with age, felt heavy in Amelie's hands, a tangible link to a past that continued to unfold, revealing new layers of love, loss, and sacrifice. It was addressed in Pierre's familiar handwriting, the bold strokes and elegant flourishes a painful reminder of the man she had loved and lost. The date on the envelope was June 1916, just days before he had gone missing, the same date as the cryptic letter to M that had spoken of betrayal and impending danger. Amelie's heart pounded in her chest as she carefully unfolded the letter, her fingers trembling with anticipation and a touch of fear. What secrets did it hold? What final message had Pierre wanted to convey? My dearest Amelie, the shadows lengthen and the storm clouds gather. I fear this may be my last letter to you, my last chance to express the depths of my love, the intensity of my longing. I know the risks I am taking, the dangers I face, but I cannot remain silent. I cannot stand idly by while corruption and betrayal consume our nation, our ideals, our very souls. I have discovered a truth so dark, so devastating, that it threatens to shatter everything I believe in. I have uncovered a network of treachery that reaches the highest echelons of power, a conspiracy that profits from the suffering and the deaths of our brave soldiers. I have gathered the evidence, the proof that will expose the guilty, that will bring them to justice. But I fear it may be too late. I know that I am being watched, that my every move is being scrutinized. I sense the serpent's presence, close, coiled, ready to strike. I fear that I have been betrayed, that my trust has been misplaced. But I do not regret my actions. I do not regret fighting for what I believe in. I do not regret loving you. You, Amelie, have been my light in the darkness, my hope in despair, my reason to keep fighting, to keep believing. You have shown me the true meaning of love, of compassion, of selflessness. You have touched my heart, my soul, in a way that no one else ever has. And for that, I am eternally grateful. If you are reading this letter, it means that I am gone, that I have fallen victim to the serpent's venom. But do not despair, my love.
Do not mourn for me.
Remember me, yes, but do not let my death be in vain. Continue the fight. Expose the truth. Bring the guilty to justice. and live your life. Fully.
Joyfully.
Passionately.
For me.
For yourself. For the future we will never share. I await you, my Amelie, beyond the veil. Not in a place of darkness and despair, but in a place of light and love, of peace and serenity. A place where we can finally be together, free from the shadows of war, free from the chains of betrayal. A place where our love can blossom eternally. Yours always and forever. Pierre. Amelie read the letter over and over again, her tears flowing freely, washing away the years of guilt, of regret, of self-doubt. Pierre's words were a balm to her soul, a testament to his unwavering love, his courage, his sacrifice. He had known the risks, he had foreseen his own death, but he had not wavered. He had fought for what he believed in, and he had loved her, fiercely, completely, until the very end. The letter also confirmed what she had already suspected, that Pierre had intended for her to play a role in exposing the truth, in bringing the guilty to justice. He had entrusted her with his love, his legacy, his final wish. And she had, unknowingly at first, then with growing awareness and determination, fulfilled that wish. Amelie realized that the veil Pierre spoke of was not just death, but also the layers of deception, the secrets and lies that had obscured the truth. He was waiting for her on the other side of that veil, in a place where truth and love reigned supreme. She looked up at Monsieur Armand, her eyes filled with gratitude and a newfound understanding. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "For everything. For bringing me this letter. For helping me find the truth. For honoring Pierre's memory." Monsieur Armand nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and respect.
"It was my duty," he said softly.
"To Pierre."
"To you."
"To justice." He paused, then added, "There is one more thing. Pierre, he left something else for you. Something personal." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing a delicate silver necklace with a single, perfect pearl pendant. He wanted you to have this," Monsieur Armand said. "He said it was a symbol of his love.
Pure.
Unblemished. Eternal." Amelie took the necklace, her fingers tracing the smooth, cool surface of the pearl. It was beautiful, simple, elegant, a perfect reflection of Pierre's love for her. She fastened the necklace around her neck, feeling its weight against her skin, a tangible reminder of Pierre's presence, his love, his enduring legacy. It was a reunion of sorts, not in the physical sense, but in spirit, a connection that could not be broken. Amelie knew that, although her love was gone, his spirit lived on. In her, in Genevieve, in the pursuit of a better world. The war had taken, but love had given back. Amelie looks at Armand.
"What will you do now?" she asks.
"I will continue to fight for justice, Amelie, in Pierre's name. And I will always be here for you and Genevieve." Amelie nods, and she realizes she is not alone. She has a new purpose, a new family, and above all, she still has the memory of a true, pure love. The war may be over, but the future is now. Chapter 17. The flight across the war-torn countryside. With Pierre's final letter and the pearl necklace a tangible reminder of his enduring love, Amelie felt a renewed sense of purpose. The trial of General Dubois was over, justice had been served, and the secrets of the past had been laid bare. But the war, though officially ended, had left deep scars on the landscape and on the hearts of those who had lived through it. Amelie decided that her next chapter would be dedicated to healing, to helping those who had suffered, to rebuilding the shattered lives and communities that the war had left behind. She and Genevieve, bound by their shared love for Pierre and their commitment to justice, decided to work together. They sold the Galerie Moreau, using the proceeds to establish a foundation in Pierre's name, dedicated to providing medical care, education, and support to the war-torn regions of France. They envisioned a network of clinics, schools, and community centers, staffed by volunteers and funded by donations, that would bring hope and healing to the forgotten corners of the country. Their first project was ambitious: to rebuild the field hospital near Verdun, the place where Amelie had first met Pierre, the place where so many lives had been saved and lost. The hospital, now a deserted ruin, held both painful memories and a powerful symbolic significance. It was a place of suffering, yes, but it was also a place of resilience, of compassion, of hope. They gathered a team of volunteers, doctors, nurses, engineers, builders, and set out for Verdun, embarking on a journey across the war-torn countryside. The landscape was a stark reminder of the devastation that the war had wrought: cratered fields, shattered forests, ruined villages, the silent testament to the brutality of human conflict. As they traveled, they encountered countless people who had been affected by the war: widows, orphans, disabled veterans, displaced families, all struggling to rebuild their lives in the aftermath of unimaginable loss. Amélie and Geneviève listened to their stories, offered them comfort and support, and promised them that they would not be forgotten. They stopped at small villages, offering medical care, distributing supplies, and sharing stories of hope and resilience. They met with local leaders, community organizers, and ordinary people who were working tirelessly to rebuild their communities. They witnessed the indomitable spirit of the human heart, the unwavering determination to overcome adversity, to create a better future for themselves and for their children. One evening, as they were camped near a ruined village, they encountered a group of refugees, huddled around a small fire, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. They were families who had fled their homes, seeking safety and shelter from the lingering violence and instability that plagued the region. Amélie and Geneviève shared their food and supplies with the refugees, offering them words of comfort and encouragement. They listened to their stories, their fears, their hopes. They learned about the challenges they faced: the lack of food, the lack of shelter, the constant threat of disease and violence. Among the refugees was a young woman named Elodie, who was heavily pregnant and clearly in distress. Amélie, drawing on her nursing experience, examined her and realized that she was in labor and that there were complications. "We need to get her to a hospital," Amélie said, her voice urgent. "But the nearest one is miles away. And the roads are dangerous." Geneviève, ever resourceful, stepped forward. "I know a way," she said. "There is a network of old smugglers' tunnels. They run beneath the countryside. They are dangerous, but they're faster and safer than the roads." Amélie hesitated. The tunnels were a risky proposition, a journey into the unknown. But Elodie's life and the life of her unborn child were at stake. "We have to try," Amélie said, her voice firm. "We have no other choice." They gathered their supplies, and with the help of some of the stronger refugees, they carried Elodie into the darkness of the tunnels. The air was cold and damp, the silence broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water and the muffled sounds of Elodie's labor pains. As they navigated the treacherous tunnels, Amélie remembered her previous journey beneath Verdun with Monsieur Armand, the journey that had led her to the truth about Pierre's betrayal and death. That journey had been driven by a quest for justice, for revenge. This journey was different. It was driven by compassion, by a desire to save a life, to bring hope to a desperate situation. They faced obstacles, challenges, moments of fear and doubt. But they persevered, guided by Genevieve's knowledge of the tunnels and by Amélie's unwavering determination to help Elodie. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened. They were close to a small town with a basic medical clinic. Elodie was quickly taken, and after several anxious hours, a healthy baby girl was born. Elodie named her Amélie. It was a moment of pure joy, a testament to the power of hope, of resilience, of the human spirit. Amélie and Geneviève knew that their mission was just beginning. Chapter 18. The Sanctuary of a Forgotten Village. The successful delivery of Elodie's baby, a tiny beacon of hope amidst the war-torn landscape, solidified Amélie and Genevieve's commitment to their mission. They continued their journey, their hearts filled with a renewed sense of purpose, their determination fueled by the small victories they had achieved along the way. They knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but they were prepared to face the challenges, to bring healing and hope to the forgotten corners of France. Their next destination was a small, remote village nestled in the hills of the Ardennes, a place that had been particularly hard hit by the war. The village, once a thriving community of farmers and artisans, was now a shadow of its former self, its buildings damaged, its fields ravaged, its people struggling to survive. As they approached the village, they were met by a scene of desolation, ruined houses, empty streets, and the haunting silence of a community that had lost its spirit. The few remaining villagers, their faces etched with hardship and despair, eyed them with a mixture of suspicion and cautious hope. Amelie and Genevieve, undeterred by the villagers' initial reserve, set about establishing a temporary clinic in the village square. They unpacked their supplies, set up makeshift beds, and began to offer medical care to those in need. They treated wounds, illnesses, and the lingering trauma of war, offering not only physical healing but also emotional support and a sense of human connection. Word of their arrival spread quickly, and soon, villagers began to emerge from their homes, seeking help and solace. They came with their injuries, their ailments, their stories of loss and survival. Amelie and Genevieve listened patiently, offering comfort, compassion, and the promise of a better future. They discovered that the village had been without a doctor or nurse for months, its medical supplies depleted, its people left to fend for themselves. The war had not only taken lives but had also eroded the fabric of the community, leaving behind a sense of isolation and despair. Amelie and Genevieve realized that they needed to do more than just provide temporary medical care. They needed to help the village rebuild, to restore its sense of community, to bring hope back to its people. They decided to establish a permanent presence in the village, transforming the ruined church into a clinic and community center. They enlisted the help of the villagers, working side by side to repair the damaged building, to create a space that would serve as a sanctuary, a place of healing, learning, and connection. As they worked, they witnessed the resilience of the human spirit, the unwavering determination to overcome adversity. The villagers, initially hesitant and withdrawn, began to open up, sharing their stories, their skills, their hopes for the future. They worked together, rebuilding not only their village but also their sense of community, their sense of belonging. Amelie and Genevieve organized workshops, teaching the villagers new skills, providing them with the tools and resources they needed to rebuild their lives. They established a school for the children, a place where they could learn, play, and dream of a brighter future. They created a community garden where they could grow food, share their knowledge, and celebrate the bounty of the earth. The village, once a place of desolation, began to come back to life. The sounds of laughter, of children playing, of people working together, filled the air. The ruined church, now transformed into a vibrant community center, became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of human connection and the resilience of the human spirit. One evening, as Amelie and Genevieve were sitting in the church, watching the villagers gather for a communal meal, they felt a sense of profound satisfaction. They had come to this forgotten village seeking to bring healing and hope, but they had also found something for themselves, a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a sense of connection to something larger than themselves. They had found a new home, a new family. An older woman from the village, named Madame Dubois, no relation to the general, approached them. "You have brought life back to our village," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "You have given us hope. You have shown us that we are not forgotten." Amelie and Genevieve smiled, their hearts filled with warmth. They had come to this village seeking to heal others, but they had also found healing for themselves. They had found a place where they could belong, a place where they could make a difference, a place where they could, finally, put the past to rest and embrace the future. The forgotten village was forgotten no more. And in the quiet of the evening, they knew Pierre's spirit was with them, guiding them, inspiring them. The war had taken much, but it had also created new bonds, new beginnings. And Amelie, at long last, felt she could move forward, without guilt, without regret, with only love and hope in her heart. Chapter 19. The Final Stand at the Abandoned Fortress. Amelie and Genevieve's work in the forgotten village had transformed it into a thriving community, a testament to their dedication and the resilience of the human spirit. But their mission was far from over. The scars of war ran deep, and there were still many communities in need of healing and support. They knew that they had to continue their work, to extend their reach, to bring hope to the forgotten corners of France. One day, a messenger arrived from a neighboring region, a mountainous area that had been a strategic battleground during the war. The messenger brought news of a group of orphan children living in an abandoned fortress, struggling to survive amidst the ruins and the lingering dangers of unexploded ordnance and hidden threats. The fortress, once a symbol of military might, was now a crumbling relic, a haven for lost souls and forgotten memories. The children, orphaned by the war, had banded together, creating a makeshift family, relying on their wits and their courage to survive. Amélie and Geneviève knew that they had to help. They gathered their supplies, assembled a team of volunteers, and set out for the abandoned fortress, embarking on a perilous journey through the rugged terrain. The journey was fraught with challenges, treacherous mountain paths, unpredictable weather, and the ever-present threat of unexploded ordnance. But Amélie and Geneviève persevered, driven by their compassion for the children and their unwavering commitment to their mission. As they approached the fortress, they were met by a scene of both beauty and desolation. The fortress, perched high on a cliff overlooking a vast valley, was a majestic structure, its stone walls scarred by war, its towers crumbling, its gates hanging precariously. But amidst the ruins, there were signs of life: a makeshift garden, a small fire burning in the courtyard, and the faint sounds of children's voices. The children, wary of strangers, initially greeted them with suspicion. They were a ragtag group, ranging in age from toddlers to teenagers, their clothes tattered, their faces etched with hardship and resilience. They had learned to be self-sufficient, to protect themselves, to rely on each other for survival. Amélie and Geneviève, using their gentle approach and their genuine compassion, slowly gained the children's trust. They offered them food, medical care, and the promise of a better future. They listened to their stories, their fears, their hopes. They learned about their struggles, their losses, their dreams. They discovered that the children had created a surprisingly well-organized community within the fortress walls. They had established rules, assigned responsibilities, and developed a system for sharing their meager resources. They had even created a makeshift school where the older children taught the younger ones what they knew. Amélie and Geneviève were deeply moved by the children's resilience, their courage, their unwavering spirit. They knew that they had to do more than just provide temporary assistance. They had to help these children build a sustainable future, to give them the opportunities they deserved, to help them heal from the traumas of war. They decided to transform the abandoned fortress into a sanctuary, a place where the children could live, learn, and grow, safe from the dangers of the outside world. They enlisted the help of their volunteers, working tirelessly to repair the damaged structures, to create comfortable living spaces, to establish a school, a clinic, and a community center. As they worked, they were joined by people from the surrounding villages, drawn by the stories of the children and the inspiring work of Amélie and Geneviève. The fortress, once a symbol of isolation and conflict, became a hub of collaboration and hope, a place where people from different backgrounds came together to build a better future. But their work was not without its challenges. The region was still plagued by instability, by remnants of the war, by lingering tensions between different factions. There were those who resented their presence, who saw them as a threat, who wanted to maintain the status quo of division and conflict. One evening, a group of armed men, former soldiers who had refused to lay down their arms, attacked the fortress, seeking to drive out Amélie, Geneviève, and the children. They were motivated by greed, by a desire to control the region's resources, by a lingering hatred for those who represented peace and reconciliation. The children, terrified, hid. Amélie and Geneviève stood their ground. They would not abandon the children. They would not abandon their mission. "We are here to help," Amélie declared. "We are not your enemy." The leader of the men sneered.
"You are in our way."
"This is our land." "This land belongs to everyone," Geneviève countered. "And we will not let you take it." A tense standoff. Weapons drawn. But then, something unexpected happened. The villagers from the surrounding communities arrived, armed with whatever they could find: farming tools, kitchen knives, anything. They stood with Amelie and Genevieve, a united front. The armed men, outnumbered and outmatched, hesitated. They had expected easy prey. Not this. They retreated,
defeated.
not by weapons, but by unity, by courage, by love. The abandoned fortress was no longer abandoned. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of community, a final stand, not of violence, but of peace. Amelie and Genevieve had shown that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail, love could conquer, and the human spirit could triumph. Chapter 20. The Reckoning of Love and Duty. The defense of the fortress, a united stand against the lingering shadows of war, marked a turning point in Amelie and Genevieve's mission. It solidified their commitment to building a lasting peace, to creating a future where children could grow up safe, educated, and free from the traumas of the past. The fortress, once a symbol of conflict, had become a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. With the immediate threat neutralized, Amelie and Genevieve focused on transforming the fortress into a permanent sanctuary for the orphaned children. They established a school, a clinic, and vocational training programs, providing the children with the tools and opportunities they needed to build a brighter future. They created a nurturing environment where the children could heal from their past traumas, rediscover their childhood, and embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. Word of their work spread throughout the region, attracting volunteers, donations, and support from individuals and organizations who shared their vision. The fortress became a model for community development, a shining example of how to rebuild lives and communities shattered by war. As the fortress thrived, Amelie and Genevieve found themselves reflecting on their own journeys, on the paths that had led them to this place, to this shared purpose. They had both loved and lost, had both experienced betrayal and sacrifice, had both been tested by the trials of war and the complexities of human relationships. One evening, as they sat together on the ramparts of the fortress, watching the sun set over the valley below, they spoke of Pierre, of his enduring legacy, of the love that had bound them together, even in his absence. "He would be so proud," Genevieve said, her voice filled with emotion, "of what we have accomplished, of the children, of us." Amelie nodded, her heart filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. He always believed in the good in people," she said. "Even in the darkest of times. He saw the potential for healing, for reconciliation, for love." They spoke of their own relationship, of the initial rivalry and mistrust, of the gradual understanding and respect that had grown between them, forged by their shared love for Pierre and their commitment to his vision. I was so wrong about you," Amelie, Genevieve confessed. I let my jealousy, my grief, cloud my judgment. I am so grateful for your forgiveness, for your friendship. "And I was wrong about you, Genevieve," Amelie replied. I judged you by your father's actions. I didn't see the kind, courageous, compassionate woman you truly are." They embraced, two women who had once been rivals, now bound together by a shared past, a shared purpose, and a shared love for a man who had touched their lives in profound ways. As the years passed, the fortress continued to flourish, becoming a vibrant community, a haven for children from all over the region. Amelie and Genevieve, their hair now streaked with silver, their faces lined with the wisdom of experience, continued to guide and nurture the children, watching them grow into strong, resilient, compassionate adults. They had created a legacy, a testament to the power of love, of forgiveness, of reconciliation. They had honored Pierre's memory, not by dwelling on the past, but by building a better future. One day, a young woman named Elodie, after the baby Amelie had delivered in the tunnels, approached Amelie and Genevieve. She was now a bright, articulate teenager, a leader among the children, a symbol of the hope and promise that the fortress represented. "Amelie, Genevieve," she said, her voice filled with respect and gratitude. I want to thank you for everything, for saving my life, for giving me a home, for showing me the meaning of love and compassion. She handed them a small, carefully wrapped package. I found this, she said, in the old archives. It had belonged to Pierre. Amélie and Genevieve unwrapped the package, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Inside, they found a small, leather-bound journal. It was Pierre's diary, a record of his thoughts, his feelings, his experiences during the war. They opened the journal, their fingers tracing the familiar handwriting, the bold strokes and elegant flourishes that brought Pierre's voice back to them, across the years, across the veil. They read his entries, his reflections on the horrors of war, his disillusionment with the corruption and betrayal he had witnessed, his unwavering belief in the power of love and compassion. They read about his encounters with Amélie, his growing feelings for her, his admiration for her strength, her kindness, her unwavering spirit. And then they found it, the final entry, written just hours before he had gone missing. My dearest Amélie, I know that I may not have much time. I sense that the end is near, but I have no regrets. I have lived my life according to my conscience. I have fought for what I believe in, and I have loved you with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my being. If you are reading this, it means that I am gone. But do not grieve for me, my love. Remember me, yes, but do not let my death be in vain. Live your life. Fully. Joyfully. Passionately. For me. For yourself. For the future we will never share. I know that you will find your way. That you will continue to fight for what is right. That you will bring healing and hope to the world. You are my heart, my soul, my Amélie. And I will love you. Always. Forever. Amélie and Genevieve closed the journal, their tears flowing freely, a mixture of grief and gratitude, of sorrow and joy. They had found their final reckoning, a confirmation of Pierre's enduring love, a testament to his courage, his sacrifice, his unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. They knew that their journey was not over, that there would always be challenges, obstacles, setbacks. But they also knew that they were not alone. That they had each other, that they had the children, that they had Pierre's memory to guide them, to inspire them, to remind them that even in the darkest of times, hope could prevail, love could conquer, and the human spirit could triumph. Their duty was now also their love, and their love was their duty. They were ready for whatever the future may hold. Together. Always. Epilogue. Years turned into decades. The fortress, once a symbol of war and desolation, had blossomed into a thriving community, a testament to the enduring power of love, compassion, and resilience. Amélie and Genevieve, their hair now white as snow, their faces etched with the wisdom of time and experience, continued to oversee the fortress, their presence a comforting constant in the lives of the children and the surrounding communities. They had expanded their work, establishing schools, clinics, and community centers throughout the region, bringing healing and hope to countless lives. They had become legends, known for their unwavering dedication, their boundless compassion, and their ability to transform even the most desolate of landscapes into havens of peace and prosperity. The children of the fortress, now grown, had spread throughout the world, carrying with them the lessons they had learned, the values they had embraced, the spirit of hope and resilience that Amélie and Genevieve had instilled in them. They became doctors, nurses, teachers, engineers, artists, community leaders, all working to make the world a better place, inspired by the example of the two women who had saved their lives and given them a future. One spring morning, Amélie and Genevieve, now well into their 80s, sat together on the ramparts of the fortress, overlooking the valley below. The sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the landscape, the air filled with the sounds of birdsong and the laughter of children playing in the courtyard below. They had lived long, full lives marked by both sorrow and joy, by loss and love, by betrayal and forgiveness. They had faced their demons, confronted their past, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. They had built a legacy, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. We did it, Genevieve, Amelie said, her voice soft, but filled with a quiet strength. We honored Pierre's memory. We built a better world. Genevieve nodded, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Yes, Amelie, she said. We did. And we did it together. They sat in silence for a moment, holding hands, their bond stronger than ever, forged by shared experiences, shared love, shared loss, and a shared commitment to a vision of a better future. Amelie looked out over the valley, at the lush green fields, the thriving villages, the children playing in the sunshine. She felt a sense of peace, a sense of completion, a sense of profound gratitude for the life she had lived, for the love she had shared, for the legacy she had created. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face, the gentle breeze in her hair. She remembered Pierre, his smiling face, his unwavering belief in the good in people, his enduring love. She remembered the whispered note, the blood-stained photograph, the final entry in his diary. She smiled, a gentle, peaceful smile. She knew that he was with her always, that his love surrounded her, protected her, guided her, that he was waiting for her, beyond the veil, in a place of light and love, of peace and serenity. She took a deep breath, the air filled with the scent of wildflowers and the promise of a new day. She opened her eyes, looking at Genevieve, her friend, her sister, her partner in this extraordinary journey. It's a beautiful day, Amelie said, her voice filled with a quiet joy. Genevieve smiled, her eyes shining with love and understanding. Yes, Amelie, she said. It is a beautiful day. And as the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing the fortress in its golden light, Amelie and Genevieve, two women who had found love, loss, and redemption in the aftermath of war, sat together, their hands clasped, their hearts filled with peace, their legacy secured, their love eternal. The sun shone, the birds sang, and life went on, beautifully, peacefully. Finally, the end.